was for 12 years the director of alternatives. And many of you, I'm sure, are familiar with alternatives, but it's an organisation that exists at St. James's Church in Piccadilly. And that's been going for 30 years. And I remember it from when I was working in London, just how amazing it was that the church was hosting this spiritual alternatives. Very interesting, though. He resigned for his job to finish on the 21st of December 2012. So right on solstice. I was so impressed with that. Well done. And very interestingly, following on in effect from what Jason was talking about this morning, which was about making those internal changes in order that we can make our external changes in the world, that I think is what our next speaker is going to be talking about. So ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together. Give a very warm welcome to Steve Nobel.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay? Yes, good, okay, thank you. So let's put that down. So before I start, I just want to get a good look at you, and I want you to get a good look at me. And I'd like to spend a couple of minutes just invoking our higher self and just connecting our energies up and creating an intention for the whole experience here and the whole weekend, however long you're staying in Glastonbury, for some kind of shift. If you want to shift, maybe you don't. Maybe you want entertainment, but if you want to shift. So are you willing to do that? Yeah. Okay. So if you uncross your body and a little bit more tricky, uncross your mind. Uncross your mind. Uncrossed mind means I'm open to whatever happens. Let me put aside all my judgments, thinking, and whatever, just for a moment. So if you can feel yourself and breathe into your body and appreciate this moment here together. This moment here together. And feel yourself in a body, but not the body. And with your breath, however you do it, connect to yourself, your essential self, your heart, your inner self. However you do it. However you do it. Your essential self is calling right now, if you can hear. With your breath and intention, just connect to that essential self. And connect to a self beyond that, the universal self. Connect to a universal self that interconnects everything, all existence, this planet, our life here, the whole universe. And if you have an intention for a shift, if you have an intention now for a shift, make it internally. It could be as simple as, I'm ready for the next step, I'm ready for a shift. I'm open, something like that. What one thing do I need to get from this weekend in Glastonbury? Make that intention. And with the power of the whole group, it amplifies, of course. It amplifies, of course. What one shift am I ready for this weekend? Send that prayer out to the universe. Take a breath. Come back to your body, your heart, your higher self with you now. And come back and have a breath and open your eyes. And throughout the weekend, if you can, keep yourself uncrossed. This is kind of like, this is uncrossed. That doesn't mean you have to believe everything I say or anybody else says. I hope you don't actually believe anything I say. You should test it out, as the Buddha said, against your experience and your better judgment, your intuition. So, all right. Let's see. Okay. Personal and planetary transitions. Steve Nobel. So, just a bit about myself so you know who I am. I was born in an averagely neurotic British family. Most of you will know what that means. So, emotionally repressed. Particularly in London, the most London version of emotionally repressed. You don't talk about anything that's important, really. You can do polite conversation, but nothing too important. So I grew up in an environment where you can't really express anything that's important, and you can't really feel or express any feelings. So I grew up in this, and but it's fine because I read a lot and I was interested in knowledge, and that continued into my adolescent. I had a difficult adolescent transition. So there are all kinds of transitions. Some are biological, and adolescence is kind of biological and soulful, but our body kind of kicks us into adulthood, doesn't it? Adolescence, there are things that happen inside the body which are difficult and confusing for a lot of people. And those transitions continue throughout our life, biological transitions, through adulthood, middle adulthood, eldership. Death is a transition. Birth is a transition. Biological transitions. There are also soul-inspired transitions, which are, I believe, connected very much to cosmic time. Those powerful astrological points, like who can remember their Saturn return, their first Saturn return? For most people, it's quite powerful, especially if you're open. I didn't know anything about this when I was 29, and it hit me, and I was like, oh my God, what is this? And it flipped me into a different course. At the time, I was married with 2 children, working in international banking. I know the previous speaker was speaking about banking. So my job was partly exporting arms to the Shah of Iran. Now that was like, at the age of 20, I was thinking, is this my life's work? This is my thinking, I could formulate that. And somewhere I knew this is not really what I'm about. But in banking, particularly, there's a golden cage where you get all these cheap mortgages and loans and things, and you get kind of trapped in this golden cage of money and everything. But my Saturn return kicked me out. I had a crisis. I pressed the eject button. I wanted to leave the planet. Seriously, I couldn't bear it anymore. I loved my family, but I couldn't bear that. So I remember really leaving the planet. I won't bore you with the details, but a voice said to me, this is my first spiritual experience, it said to me, there is hope. And I was like, that's very strange. I'm really at a point of despair, and there is hope. And it said it 3 times, and I believed the voice, and I came back. I called for help, and I didn't go. So that was my first experience of the beginning of another transition, several years of psychotherapy, and then a career change. I left banking, went into local government for 10 years. My father died in 1991, which kick-started a whole spiritual journey that reawoke inside of me. My now ex-wife could not understand that journey and said to me, you're into the cults. What cult are you into? And she could not understand meditation is not necessarily a cult, and so we divorced. Very painful divorce. Very painful because my family didn't understand also why I was divorcing. You can't say, I'm divorcing my wife because of a spiritual impulse. It doesn't look good, does it? So they didn't understand it. I was in local government for 10 years, again another 10-year cycle. And then after doing a lot of spiritual work and exploring a lot of things, I asked the universe, it's a very clever question. You can ask the universe questions, like a tarot reading, you can ask a question. Should I resign from this job was the question. And the answer came back on a t-shirt, just do it, Nike, Nike, just do it. So I thought, well, does Nike have the answer to my dilemma? I don't know. But I walked on the road, and within 2 minutes I saw exactly the same sign. And so I resigned in that moment, and that led me to this amazing transition, which was kind of what I call a smooth transition, where I started to follow my heart, follow a dream, and I started to, just by loads of synchronicities, found myself at alternatives at the right time. There was a massive fight between the old directors, and eventually I was the one holding the whole company, knowing nothing really about business. So I had to ask my higher self, how do you run a company and getting the answers, and how do we make money and getting the answers, and how do we make this company successful and getting the answers? So I really tried and tested out this spiritual thing in a commercial environment, and it was from a company that was nearly bankrupt in 99, it became extremely successful. By the time I left, it's very successful, and I think it's always good to leave something when it's very successful, don't you think? Not leave it when it's kind of spiraling down. So I left it. And that was part of my most recent transition, which is the one which inspired a book, actually, which is not out yet, so I'm not selling it to you. Hold on. There we are. Fintorn Press, Personal Transitions, that's coming out in November. So I went through this real big transition, which meant I had to leave alternatives, I had to leave my career, I had to leave the second love of my life, who I lived with for 12 years, and I didn't work this out, it just happened, I just had no choice. And I had to leave a home that I really adored, and all the anchors of my current existence went. So I was thrown into this very deep and strong transition, which involved something you may have heard of, a dark night of the soul. Have you heard of that? And I'd read about it. Thomas More I've met a few times. He talks about this in his book, which is very beautiful. But when I experienced it, it was like, oh my gosh, it's not depression. It's just everything becomes dark and meaningless and despair. And I've had this terrible despair for several months, which I'd never experienced before because I've been 20 years in the light. You know, every Monday was another positive talk, and every weekend was an inspiring workshop. So to go into a dark night of the soul felt like a failure to me because 20 years in the light, I shouldn't go through this kind of thing. And I had a Kundalini experience as well, which was also like the experience was like an electric storm in the body. And this again frightened me, thinking, I've read about it, but this I thought was romantic, and I thought it was like opening up many beautiful portals, but it was very difficult. So that transition lasted 3.5 years, and I wrote this book as I was going through the transition, and I interviewed a lot of other people going through transition, because I thought something is happening now that I've not experienced before in my life. Even though I've explored many spiritual paths and heard many, many ideas about spirituality. This was different. I didn't know what it was. So this is my theory now about what it is, which, of course, it might not be right, of course. But so my first idea is that what I realized is that a lot more people are going through this experience of transition. Is anybody here going through transition? Where they're going through a sense of change, a sense of direction seems to be shifting, or a sense that they know that their life might be okay, but something is not quite right and they need to change it fundamentally, but they don't know what it is. That's a very difficult place to be, because I was in that position and I didn't know what to do about it. I've tried everything, every technique I knew. I saw 18 healers, I redistributed my work, I went for longer chats with my partner, but it didn't work. It still didn't work. So my idea is that a lot more people are being called into a personal transition process of a most powerful awakening nature now, because the planet is awakening. And many of you have read that the planet's ascending. Have you heard that? Many teachers. And I thought, well, that sounds like a very nice idea, but what does it mean? But my idea now is that as the planetary vibrational rate is ascending, which means to me, I think that more the energy of love is being anchored strongly on the planet. Now, I can't prove that to you, of course. A lot of people are saying this. And the energy of fear is coming out the woodwork, because was it the Course in Miracles that says anything that's not love is kind of evoked by love in its presence, or something like that. So there's a very strong shadow on the planet right now. There's a lot of war and mayhem and greed that's coming out because the vibrational core of the planet itself is shifting. And we're feeling that effect because we're not separate from the planet. So I was kind of pulled in this whirlwind of a journey because of that, I think. And the journey itself changed me radically on the inside. And I think a transition is not just a shift externally. Change is external. You can change your girlfriend. Like, hey, there's another girlfriend. You can change your job, there's another job. But if you go through a transition, you change internally fundamentally. Everything looks different and feels different on the other side. Does that make sense? Okay. There are a number of prophecies that talk about this time now, and I believe they're all about this time. There's no way of proving that, of course, like Revelations, Hopi prophecies, Mayan calendar. The interesting thing about the Mayan calendar is that I met a Mayan elder at Alternatives in 2008 or 9, and he told me this 2012 date is actually made up. He said that the actual calendar he thinks points to a date between 2015 and 2017. That was way before 2012 happened, so I thought, well, okay, that's interesting. And he said that we are going into a very profound planetary process, so don't, dispel the Mayan calendar just yet. I don't think, yeah. So all of those prophecies talk about a time of turbulence, a time of darkness, a time of ignorance, that's then followed by a time of light. So, but if we're going to go through that time, we can't just sit and watch it on the TV or meditate and go, it's very nice, it's all out there. We've got to go through that. And I think this is not the subject of this particular talk, but my personal journey at the moment is, how do I embrace spiritual activism, saying no to the darkness in certain top places where it needs to be said no to, and spiritual practice. There seems to be a gap between the two. Like, a lot of activists I know are very angry, and a lot of spiritual people tell me, just meditate and it'll all be okay. And I think somewhere between the two, there's inner work and outer work. It's not just the inner work. That's my feeling. That's my feeling. But there we are. Okay. Personal transition is very much like that process of going from caterpillar to butterfly. Now, a caterpillar is drawn into this process and changes radically and fundamentally. And its system, when it goes through this process, initially thinks it's being attacked by some external virus, and it starts to defend itself. And then gradually the change overwhelms I can't remember, was it Barbara Marx Hubbard talks about this in one of her books, about how the caterpillar actually has to overcome its resistance and go through the process, because it has resistance to going through this process. And if you're going through a powerful transition or approaching one, you will have resistance to this process. It's normal. You could have done 30 years spiritual practice, and it won't make any difference. You will still resist it because it's like, what the hell is this? I don't know what's going on. My body's starting to feel different. I don't know myself in the same way. Resistance is normal, but eventually futile, I think. In Star Trek they say all resistance is futile. So your response to the process will alter the process itself. You can resist it so much that it aborts the process, but if you abort the process, then it's almost like you're aborting life and you're aborting your potential for awakening, I believe. So it's like going with it. Let me see, I think I wrote something about that here. Hold on. Oh yes, here we go. Howard Sasportas, he was a great astrologer, said, all around us in nature, life unfolds according to certain inner designs. A rosebud opens into a rose, an acorn grows into an oak, a caterpillar emerges as a butterfly from its cocoon. Is it unreasonable to assume that human beings share this quality with the rest of creation, that we too unfold according to an inner plan? And that inner plan may not be, known to our conscious mind, which is a scary bit. Because do you know that part of us really wants to control our lives? Do you get that? We can go with the flow, but actually, hey, hang on a minute, I'm not sure about that. There is the other thing around this time is that, let me see, where are we? Oh, here we are. This is a great one. Have you seen the film Occupy Love? No, it's real. If you go on Google and just type in Occupy Love, there's a brilliant film being made about the Occupy movement, and I didn't realize how spiritual that movement is, how heart-led it is. It's really worth seeing it. And the producer's called Velcro Ripper. I don't think he was born with that name. Anyway. He says, look up, the skyscrapers are falling, rapid climate change, economic collapse, ecological collapse, political instability, technological escalation. The only thing we can be sure about is radical indeterminacy. In the face of this acceleration, we have choices to make. We can freeze in fear, become paralyzed, or rise on our surfboards and surf the power of the wave, particle, wave of change, tsunami of transformation. So it's our, how we approach it. Let's see. So there are 3 transitional pathways, I believe, personal transitional pathways that we take. The first one I call a smooth transition. And this image is the image of a boat leaving harbour. And you know the metaphor of safe harbours. We have our safe harbours, we've got our boat there, we're having our parties, we're inviting our spiritual friends onto our boat, we're doing all the things. But we're not going to sail our boat out of the harbour because, why would we do that? I'm happy here. So here in my life, I was quite happy being, married and having this great home and having this spiritual life. I didn't want to do that. I thought I'd already done that over the years, so why should I do it anymore? But the life was calling me out once more, and so I resisted it. There's a great author I heard speak, he's passed over now, called John O'Donoghue. Have you heard of him? John O'Donoghue, Irish poet, mystic, author. He said, you can trust the promise of this opening. Unfurl yourself into the grace of beginning. This is at one with your life's desire. This is at one with your life's desire. So this is about upping anchor, sailing out the safe harbour, following a dream, initiating the process. Now that initiating the process might mean, first of all, leaving something. Like you might be in a very, very bad marriage, and you might leave it is doing that. Taking the first step. And that creates the vacuum for the next step. Or leaving the bad job, or leaving something behind. Does that make sense? You know, if you can't expect to create something new while the old is fully occupying your life. So I've known many. The moment I left my first wife, synchronicity opened incredibly. 6 months of ongoing. I didn't know what synchronicity was at the time, but it just happened every day. That was because the space was opened from. It's not that I didn't love my first wife, but our paths were like not in any shape or form on the same wavelength. And when I meet her now, she's just like, like New York compared to me going over here. So we could have tied ourselves together with all kind of financial commitments and family, but in the end, we'd have been desperately, desperately unhappy, and our children would have been desperately unhappy. Now my children think I'm weird, but they love me. And the great thing about taking the journey is that once you've taken a journey that's powerful, to your children, your grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, that is a gift that you give to them. Because Granddad, however weird, did the journey, and he did that, becomes a gift for them. So my children don't completely get my journey, but my grandchildren, I think, look at me and go, Granddad, like I help them talk to trees, and I talk to them about fairies, and they kind of go, like, I said to my granddaughter, do they teach you this in school? She goes, no, Granddad, they don't. So what do they teach you in school these days? I don't know. All right. But if I'd have been a miserable banker, hating it, then what would I offer them? Only my despair, only my angst, only my anger. What gift is that, really? Nothing. The second pathway is rough transition. Now, a rough transition, the metaphor is, so the universe would say to you, take a choice. And you go, I don't know what choice to take. And then the universe will throw, eventually, has anybody been through a rough transition? Like a really rough, like, whoa, what's happening in my life, And it could be, it's usually catalyzed by something like divorce or redundancy or health crisis or accident. A catalyst comes in and blows up your life. Anybody recognize the catalyst? And if a catalyst comes in the form of a person, don't fall in love with them. So many of my friends who have met catalysts in the form of lovers and life has blown up, and they go, oh, but you don't marry them because they're terrible marriage material. They're absolutely... My life was blown up by a woman, beautiful woman from Texas, and we were going to get married, but I realized she's terrible. I'm terrible marriage material for her. Not that she's terrible, I'm terrible for her. And now we're kind of friendly, but on a completely different path. Don't marry the catalyst. So here, the resistance is stronger than the desire to take the step, the desire to follow the dream or the desire to leave something, so you end up in a storm. And it can be very rough. So in the book, I've got a number of stories about people going through a rough transition. So one of my good friends went to prison, actually. And this was his rough transition. Prison woke him up. He had an awakening in prison. Imagine that. It's not a great place to have an awakening. It's like, we're all one. He talks like this now. We're all one. He's going to write a book now, From Burglar to Buddha. I think it's a great title. Another good friend of mine, very close friend, I introduced him to his wife, actually, went through a near-death experience on a motorway where a lorry hit his car, he spun out of control, and in that moment he realized he's going to get killed. But when the car hit the side of the motorway, he walked somehow out unscathed. From that moment, he was a money-making, entrepreneurial, 200 grand a year type corporate bod. He stepped out and he's just like a different person now, completely. He's a photographer in Hastings or something now. I don't know what he does, but he's completely changed. Now, the story of Jonah and the whale is very classic in this kind of case of a rough, resisting a journey becomes a rough transition. You know the story of Jonah and the whale? God said to Jonah, go to Nineveh and preach my word. Tell them to repent of thy ways. And Jonah said, you must be joking. I know what they do. It was part of the Assyrian Empire, I think. I know what they do to people. I'm not going. So he jumped on a boat to the opposite direction, and after a couple of days, a great storm came up, and the sailors said, there's bad luck on this boat. We need to find out, draw straws, who's the fault? And it was Jonah. And Jonah owned up and said, yes, it's me. I'm resisting God's word. And he said, you must throw me overboard. And the sailors didn't want to do it. They threw him overboard, and he was swallowed by a whale. You know the story? Swallowed by the whale. He spent 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the whale. Very powerful, isn't it? 3 days and 3 nights. And then the whale spat him out at Nineveh. where God intended him to go. He preached the word and they converted. And they listened, apparently. So that's a rough transition. Has anybody experienced this? This is what I had. This was my last 3 or 4 years. It was that. It was shipwreck. And I was on the shore thinking, where the hell am I? Where the hell am I? Everything had blown up in my life. It wasn't just that things were tough. That a super rough transition is an existential crisis. Existential crisis. Your inner world starts to fragment and shatter. Your ego can't hold the same stories it held on to before. Something radical starts to happen internally. So for me, it was a Kundalini experience, dark night of the soul. And I went to 18 healers. None of them could help me. And I had a very strong healing practice that didn't work when this happened. And I was like, oh my gosh, it doesn't work anymore. I called upon my higher self, nothing. When this happens, your connection to spirit goes completely. At the very moment you need it the most. It's very, Christ on the cross, why have you forsaken me? That's that moment. It's a very weird, in Kabbalistic, mystical Kabbalah, crossing the abyss. When you cross the abyss, all connection to the divine goes. It's the most scariest. Does anybody here run on intuition mostly? I know I do. I'm like, alternatives, it was all my intuition. Book him, no, yes. It wasn't my logical mind. As soon as my intuition went, I'm like radarless in the world. It was a really scary experience. So a friend of mine went through one of these, and she actually died through this transition. She couldn't make the other side, which was a bit scary for me because I was going through it, and she died, and she was a spiritual teacher of mine. I thought, oh, crikey, if she can't do it, I can't make this. She wrote a poem and said, yes, perhaps we needed that dark winter. Perhaps our dormancy was part of the plan. For lifetimes, even eons to ponder our heart's desire and whether God favors love and freedom or erects prison bars. Jill Edwards. Rainer Maria Rilke said, it is possible I am pushing through solid rock. It is possible I am pushing through solid rock in flint-like layers as the ore lies alone. I am such a long way in, I see no way through. That's a super rough transition. Super rough transition. You with me? Am I losing you? Is it all right? Yeah. Okay. The 5 stages of a transition. How are we doing? Gosh. First stage of a personal transition is soul tension. So soul tension is not the same as ordinary ego tension. Ego tension is, I want a new Mercedes, I want a new house, I want a new girlfriend. I don't have it. I must have it. That kind of tension is like ego tension. I used to work in banking, I see a lot of ego tension there. I've only got 2 Porsches. I want a Mercedes, like, as if, like, what the... It's a mad culture, the kind of bonuses they got, like they're in the million pound thing. And people get angry if they only have £1 million. It's like, I've seen really angry about, I'm worth more than this. And, wow, okay. So the first type of tension, we need ego tension, otherwise nothing would happen. You wouldn't wash the dishes, you wouldn't go shopping. You go shopping because you're hungry, and there's a tension in that. So tension is useful. At a planetary level, there's huge tension, systemic tension going on in the world. The problems are huge, creating huge tension. If you look at the news, don't you feel tension about, the bombs hitting Gaza and Monsanto doing what it's doing, all these things. It creates it. The world is going through a tension, but systemic tension is necessary for the shift. Even Monsanto, at some level, are necessary for the shift. And even conflict, at some level, is necessary for shift. I think it's a very boring game, personally, at a global level. I don't know if you're bored. Are you bored watching it? Like, how do people create sense, suffering, and drama like this? But at some level, people need that to move. And I think for people who are open spiritually, it's very difficult to understand why on earth would you blow up your family to create some level of awakening. But for some people, that's part of their journey, perhaps. But it still doesn't stop us speaking out. I'm very active on social media about this situation, particularly. I think we should add our voices to stop it. So soul tension leads to every type of transition. Now, the soul tension is a bit like a pressure cooker. It builds, and as human beings, we can only take a certain amount of pressure. But the pressure that this soul tension has to break through is not just our own personal resistance, is it? You want to make a life shift. It's not just your own, shall I make a life shift? No. Well, yeah, what shall I? No. There are other things around you that hold you in place. Family. Very strong, don't you find? I'd like to make a life shift, Mum. Certainly. Usually families are kind of going, what do you mean? They usually kind of want to resist. Not all families, of course, but there's a kind of tendency of families to keep the status quo, keep you happy, be safe, don't take the journey out. Not all families, but a lot of families is that. Beyond that, there are other systems. There are peer groups. There are corporations that we work for. There are all kinds of systems that hold us in place, There are groups of friends that meet just because we can chat about problems. Lots of friend groups are held together by problem connection, or drama connections. The moment you shift away from that, you can't connect with those same people anymore. And often they'll show up as a doubting committee. Why are you doing this? Why are you changing? It's dangerous. You should have... anybody experienced a doubting committee coming from the outside? This is if you're trying to shift and the systems around you are not willing to accommodate that shift. And so often you might have to leave certain friends. You might have to leave certain corporations. Otherwise the shift just doesn't progress. There are some companies, I feel, that are like green kryptonite. You're awakening a superpower. Yes, I'm following my bliss, as Joseph Campbell said. And the green kryptonite corporation goes, you must be joking, you stay there. Green kryptonite kept Superman weak, remember? So there's certain environments that keep us weak. So we have to step away from those compassionately, not radically, not like chopping. Okay, I've got a friend who's just chopped nearly all her friends out because they disagree with her. I'm not talking about that, because we need feedback, right? But it's about knowing, if you want to take a step, who's going to support that, who's in line for that, finding new support groups. So what else do I need to say about this? And culturally as well, there's cultural resistance. So for British people, let me see, okay, I'm just going to express my inner truth. Well, in Britain, there is this kind of, I've experienced it anyway, of a kind of, let's keep everything quite nice, not rock the boat too much. I don't know, maybe in the West Country you're more radical, I think, but certainly over in London we're much more polite and much more, don't do that. Does anybody want to ask anything so far before I just keep going? Does anybody want to say anything, make a comment? Anybody got a comment before I go on to the next stage of the transition? If you're feeling the transition now, here's what Rumi says about it. There is some kiss we want our whole lives. There is some kiss we want our whole lives. The touch of spirit on the body. Seawater begs the pearl to break its shell. There is some kiss we want our whole lives, the touch of spirit on the body. Seawater begs the pearl to break its shell. That's a transition. Yeah. Begging seawater. Break its shell. Break its shell. Anybody want to comment so far? Or are you okay? Okay. So this one is just one version of soul tension, spinning a lot of plates. Does anybody here spin a lot of plates? Got to keep your life going, because if you don't, something will fall and the whole thing might crash. That's just one version. It's, I had to pick one image, but that's just one way of doing it. Some people might respond to soul tension by retreating from the world and running away from stuff and just, avoiding completely. But soul tension is a sense that you're not living your most authentic life, I suppose very simply. And I remember when I presented this book to the publishers, and they said, well, what's it about? I said, well, it's essentially about, a kind of process that helps you live your most authentic life. And I looked at them all, these were all salespeople. And I looked at them, I could see in their minds, they were going, am I living my most authentic life? And I realized that's a really difficult question to pose. Are you living your most authentic life? And it's not about a state of perfection, because it's about ongoing exploration and experimentation, isn't it? We don't know unless we experiment, put our foot in the water and test it. Is this the most authentic life? For example, I didn't know that writing was so important until I started writing. I didn't know I could do it until I started. And I did a lot of other things. I tried all kinds of creative painting and stained glass making and jewelry making, and none of them did it. That wasn't it. But when I started writing, that was it. It was like a red hot, you know that game when your children, warmer, colder. It's a bit like that in the body. You can feel it, can't you? When you're on track, it's warmer, colder. Okay, come back. Feedback is a very essential part of the process. And if you've ever flown on a plane, planes run by feedback. You know, the pilot has all this equipment, and it's like on course, off course. Planes go off course all the time, wind and everything, half a degree. So the co-pilot doesn't say to the captain, "You're an idiot. You're an idiot. You're off course." That's not feedback, right? Feedback is you're half a degree off course this way, correct it. And so that's feedback. Hotter, colder, hotter, colder. And we have to test things out, experiment, try things. The transition, your higher self doesn't go, well, look, if you take this step, here's the whole vision of your new life. It doesn't usually always do that, because that would take away the journey, wouldn't it? You have to explore and try climbing this mountain and swimming that lake and finding out what you really, really want to do. And it's always challenging, always challenging. No challenge, no transition. Okay. Choice crisis. There was a film called Choice Point some time ago. Did anybody see that film? Choice Point. Powerful moments of choice in our lives. So we know in our own lives there are powerful moments of choice. Shall I marry this man or not? My whole life's going to shift, isn't it? Shall I live in Singapore or not? There are powerful choices that affect everything. Shall I follow this spiritual path or not? You know, it's not like, shall I change my brand of toothpaste? It's not like that. It's like, you know, really fundamentally, you know, your whole life will shift 20 degrees if you take that choice. That's a powerful choice. And those choices are the ones we most often resist. Alan Cohen, the author, said, "It takes a lot of courage to release the familiar and seemingly secure to embrace the new. But there is no real security in what is no longer meaningful. There is more security in the adventurous and the exciting. For in movement there is life, and in change there is power." There is more security in the adventurous and exciting. For in movement there is life, and in change there is power. Now, if we resist it, again, if we resist the taking the choice, this is what the Gospel of Thomas says on this. "If you bring forth that which is within yourself, that which you possess will save you. If you do not find that within yourself, that which you do not possess will kill you." Gospel of Thomas. It's one of those books that's been kicked out of the Bible for obvious reasons, right? Now, one of the things I haven't mentioned is that one of the objects of a personal transition is to find what they call this elusive thing of inner potential. You know, it's a very abstract thing, isn't it? So I heard somebody in a workshop say once, "I just want to liberate my inner potential," which is fine. But we don't know what that inner potential is, do we, until we take the step. Until we realize we're a good mother, a good writer, a good speaker, a good sower, a good lover, a good kisser, a good whatever, you know. We have to take the step and find out. Inner potential. Now, in the book, I think I've written, I can't remember them all, but there's about 15 archetypal energies that we seek to release. It's kind of universally, and we each got our own unique combination, but I can't remember all of them, so I won't bother but it would be things like the path of awakening the seed of the teacher, for example, that wants to empower others through word and speech and workshops. Some people awaken this potential inside of them, and they become teachers on the world stage, or even in their local, area. It doesn't mean about being some great guru. There's the healer seed, which is about healing all the kingdoms of nature and the human kingdom, healing themselves, obviously, as well. There are people, my ex-partner, in her transition, awoke the healer seed. She's now a devoted, and it's not just about being a healer, it's about being devoted to the healing practice. She just wants to create this her whole life around the core of healing. There's another seed would be the synergy seed, which is around, this one's very popular for a lot of people now. It's about awakening what does it mean to be a true man, masculine, What does it mean to be a true woman? Feminine energy. And where does this dance exist within us all? This masculine and feminine dance, this synergy of energy. So a lot of people then go off and follow Tantra or these kind of things to find that potential inside of them. Anybody here interested in that kind of seed? Right, one woman only? Well, it's going to be very popular, obviously. Nobody else, but I'm sure secretly they are. This is something that I was very interested in. How do we awaken? And men, I think, are a little bit behind women generally in the world in this spiritual movement. That women have expressed, find their inner goddess and all these kind of things, but men, to find our inner pan has been a little tougher. And, we are coming, but we're just a little bit behind, I think. I speak for myself, of course. How am I doing? Got to watch the time. I don't overrun, and I must tell you everything that you need to know. Another seed would be sage. So for some people, stepping into eldership is a very, very powerful midlife. Anybody going through midlife, gone through midlife, that transition? So what's through that portal is eldership, which means you have your wisdom that you can give back to the world. You can give back to the children, back to the grandchildren. But if you haven't taken the step, you just become a disgruntled, upset, angry person. And that's nothing to offer back. But if you've taken the step, taken the journey, awoken the seed of the sage, what you give back, people will listen to and people will feel it very strongly. My grandchildren listen to me, and my ex-wife says, "Why doesn't they listen to me? They always listen to you, but they never listen to me." Or it's just some energy in me that they recognize as a bit different. I'm not always like criticizing them. I'm just encouraging them, perhaps. I don't know. What other seeds can I remember? There's, I forgot. In this moment, I can't remember them, so they're not important for you to know. So, choice or crisis, you take the choice or you hit the crisis. And the crisis will be either internal or external. So, the external is the rough sea, the internal one is the ship being shipwrecked. In our lives, I think we take all these paths, smooth, rough, and super rough, because we want to experience. There's nothing wrong in taking a rough or super rough transition. I think that sometimes our soul chooses it because it is the most potent way for us to wake up. If we take a really difficult, rough or super rough transition, I've taken many smooth transitions, but the super rough one has a different energy of power to it. If you've been through one, you'll know what I mean. That level of crisis and confrontation pulls out some sense of resourcefulness in ourselves. Rumi again, I'll say I like Rumi. There's a candle in your heart ready to be kindled. There is a candle in your heart ready to be kindled. There is a void in your soul ready to be filled. You feel it, don't you? You feel it, don't you? Now, if there's anybody in the audience feeling that now, when I say you feel it, don't you, you'll know I'm talking to you. You feel it, don't you? And Goethe said, as long as you haven't experienced this, to die and to grow, you are only a troubled guest on this dark earth. So long as you haven't experienced this, to die and so to grow, you are only a troubled guest on this dark earth. This is not all love and light and, angels are flying around us. This is like gritty, powerful, potent journey they're talking about. You're either extremely absorbed in this or completely bored. I don't know which it is. But I'm doing all right. I'm doing all right. Fantastic. I'm doing all right. Thank you. I'm doing all right. Oh, phew. Okay. I'm going to put that on my webpage. You're doing all right. Release. So this is where any transition gets really underway, when the journey really kicks off, is release. So up to this point, up to the point of tension, you can always refuse the journey. Up to the point of choice and crisis, you still can abort the journey. But once you've taken the step, or life has initiated the journey, there is no stopping the process. You can't turn back. And the first stage of this is release. Release. External release, friends, jobs, possessions, property, loved ones, situations, opportunities. Go. Also, as you go through the process, as your vibration changes, your resonance with certain people and things will cease to exist. You might resonate with certain, like I had a whole collection of rune rings, made magically under a full moon by this mad druid in Richmond who used to sing every rune in with the full moon and used to, with his hammer. And I had more rings than fingers. But when I started this transition, I realized that some of those rings I had for 25 years, that none of them resonated with me anymore. I had to release them all. So I threw them all in a lake, which was quite hard because I loved them, but I let them go. I let go of everything except a suitcase of clothes, I think, in my last transition. I had nothing. Nothing. I let go of everything. And I think it's always a powerful thing to release once in your life. This is the second time I've done it in my life. Nature abhors a vacuum. The moment you release, it all comes flooding back eventually, I've still got, my ex-partner says, you've got more jewelry than a lady, a woman, I've got loads of like Moldavite rings now and all this. And these resonate with me more now. So this one was bought from Stone Age around the corner. So it's beautiful. Internally, the shift goes, belief systems go. What you used to believe starts to shift. Values start to shift. Labels start to shift. Sense of identity starts to shift. So one of the things in my life was I identified myself very strongly as a director of alternatives. People would say, who are you, what do you do? Very proudly, I am a director of alternatives. It was my whole life. I dedicated myself to it totally, 24/7. And I believe this is my great work. The great work for me is this. I'm going to make this organization great around the planet. That stopped. I realized suddenly my passion for the organization went within months. I love the people, but I didn't feel that I wanted to do the same work anymore. I'd heard too many love and light talks. I'd heard too many Hay House sound bites. I'd heard too much. I couldn't take another angelic talk. And I do love angels, and I meditate with them often, but I couldn't take any more angel cards. My ex-partner has about 12 decks. I couldn't take any more. I used to say to her, do you need another deck? Oh, yes. Yes, I do. Yes, I do. So my passion shifted to writing. And I began to, people used to say, who are you? What do you do? I say, I am a writer. It has such a different resonance, and I still feel, I'm a writer. That's what I am. That's what I do. And that shift was a very powerful one. And I'm a grandfather. Father and grandfather. I'm a grandfather. So that really strong resonated in me. That's part of the midlife, I think, values. There's been studies around value shifts in midlife, particularly. Men and women have different value shifts. If you want to find out more, the film by Wayne Dyer, The Shift, very good film, talks about shift in values at midlife. It's because he's gone through that, of course, Wayne Dyer, I think in a very powerful way. And it's interesting seeing some of these speakers because you see them go through midlife. You go, going through midlife. Deepak Chopra, I can see midlife there. And on the other side, they're different. They're more humble somehow. On stage and off stage, speakers are often different. So I was always curious about how they were off stage as much as they were on stage. So, and there are some people. Byron Katie was one of my favorites. She was exactly the same off stage as on stage. And I thought, that's cool. That's very cool. Marianne Williamson is the same off stage as well. And Caroline Myss is very tough women, They're tough off stage as well. Caroline Myss thought I was cute. So I used that to our advantage. I kept booking her back. I said, I'll book her back. She'll come back through me. She will come back. Okay. Release. So everything goes. And in that void, nature abhors a vacuum thing. New things will come in its own time. But initially, you're releasing the old. You're letting go. And it's in the Native American tribes, they have this ritual once a year of giveaway, don't they call it? I forget what they call it now. But they give everything away to the tribe. And they know it all comes back, In our culture, we grasp, do you find? We hold on to everything, our money, and that creates such a scarcity. When I wrote a book on money, and I found out that 1/3 of the world's wealth is held in tax havens. 1/3, that's trillions of dollars, is held in tax havens. That means it's not circulated, it's not doing anything. In America, there was a scheme called Rust Money, where this group introduced the idea that interest should be paid when money is being used and not when it's stagnant. It's a great idea. Roosevelt declared it un-American and banned it. So there have been really interesting ideas around money, because I think once the financial systems shift, the whole world will shift, don't you feel? It's money, which money's not bad, of course, it's an energy, but money as it's being used now in the systems, and 99% of it is computer blips in a system, some computer screen. It's not real anymore. It's all electrical blips. And the system is very biased, unfair. It's very much like a casino. That's what I saw when I was in it, and it's not like, what I thought it was anyway. 10 minutes. 10 minutes, okay. Release. Recalibration. So in recalibration, and all these phases overlap one another. You can't always tell, where am I now? Oh, I don't know. You could be between two phases, or you could even, we're quite multidimensional, so you could be in three phases at once. But this phase is essentially the caterpillar enters the cocoon, and it's like going through the transformation internally, but the new hasn't started yet. The new life has not started yet. Hey, universe, I've given up everything. I've signed up for it. I've taken a step. Where's my new life? Where's my new soulmate? Where's my new job that's going to be, wonderful? We're not there. And this is part of the process because we have to trust that the universe is working perfectly. The ground rules are shifting. So in a smooth transition, it's almost like going to a new continent where you don't know the rules of reality. You don't know how the culture works. You need a rough guide. You need to work out, well, how do they live in Turkey? How do they interact? How do they communicate? You're in new territory. That's a smooth transition. In a rough and super rough transition, so a rough one will feel like a void. A super rough one will feel a bit like a dark night, probably, dark night of the soul, where you really are, this is never going to end. This journey is never going to end. I have friends emailing me still saying, I'm sorry I took the step. And this is normal. I'm sorry I did this journey. I'm sorry I started because, in this super rough, because it's just too challenging. It's just too much. But it has to be strong to transform us on the inside. So I say to them usually, there'll be one day where you'll love uncertainty. And, that stops them for a while and then they come back again. We don't like uncertainty, do we? So, I also don't like it, but I've had to learn to love uncertainty. I don't know what was going to happen here, really. I've never been here before. I didn't really even check out this experience. I was asking a few people before, what's it like? What are they doing? What are they talking about? Am I going to fit in here? And then I realized that definitely I would. So, recalibration. Anything more? Really, for a super rough transition, it feels like crossing the abyss. It really is a major test in life, and you may only do it once in your life, but it's crucifixion in the Alice Bailey. Anybody here into the Alice Bailey things? It's that journey of crucifixion to resurrection. It's extremely tough. I remember looking down in the River Thames twice going, the pain in my body is so extreme, I could jump in and end it, And I looked, twice, really seriously, I thought I could do it because it's so strong. Day in, day out. There was no respite for 7 months. And it's a long time to be in constant chaos and constant internal angst. I used to have dreams of being killed and chased and fiery demons and being stabbed and giant spiders and snakes every night. It's like, and then in the daytime I would have these weird visions as well. And it's just like, I can't bear it. It's, where's the love and light gone in my life? But it'd gone. Recalibration. It teaches us trust. Trust. At in a smooth transition, for example, I took my son abseiling. Anybody done abseiling or something like that? He was 15 at the time. I took him up Lake District, and we went up 300 foot. And I said, we're going to do abseiling. He said, great, Dad. And then the guy tied the rope to the rock, and we looked down. And Peter says, I ain't doing that. So I said, I'll go first. Right. So I went first. Have you ever stood on a rock, like kind of horizontal, 300 foot above, going, oh my gosh. The first 5 steps were absolutely terrifying. But then it became the most exhilarating process. And then my son did it, and at the bottom he said, can we do that again, Dad? That's the exhilaration of the process at the other end. It releases tremendous energy. I hope this is practical as well. I didn't want it to be too esoteric. I want it to be practical. Because I think spirituality has to be practical. You have to get it, because it is about our lives. Our lives is the experiment, the chemistry lab in a way. It's not just abstract. Renewal is the 5th and final stage. And in renewal, 5 minutes, okay. in Renewal, the sun rises. So in a smooth transition, the goal, you become closer to the goal. It starts to be realized. You start to see it. Synchronicity starts to spark up. In a rough transition, the storm calms down and your life starts to get back on an even keel. In a super rough transition, the dark night goes and the illumination returns even stronger than before. It's almost like the light starts to internally, like the sun rises internally and your connection to your higher self comes back. Thank God, wow. 3 years without that connection was a very long time. And when it comes back much more potent, much more stronger, in a way that no amount of meditation or workshops could produce. Because you've been out in the wilderness and you've seen the darkness and you've come back and you go, okay, now I'm transformed. So that's renewal. Let me see. But again, we've come out the other side of extreme challenge, chaos and crisis. There's a returning sense of awakening, purpose and flow. Synchronicity kicks up again. Intuition kicks up again. Internal connection kicks up again. We start to find this idea of purpose, or what the old, the Golden Dawn, Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn used to say, your will and your purpose on the earth. What are you here for? They had this great invocation, something, I can't remember exactly, it's something, give up the night, step towards the day. It is time to release the darkness and embrace the light. There was something like that. And I thought, whoa, that's like, back in the 1800s, very powerful, evocation. It's like a transition, initiation into something else. Right, you have 5 minutes to ask me your most soulful question that you ever wanted to ask in your life. And, oh, wait a minute, there's one more. Oh, yeah, forgot. So it's going to come out in November. If you can pre-order through Findhorn Press. I'm not selling anything today. I just thought I'd like to test it out and see if the material still resonates, if I need to learn anything before it comes out so I can adjust it before it gets published. So if you might change my mind. I might rewrite some of the book, if you ask me something. So does anybody want to say, comment, ask anything? Or?
We have a question at the back here, actually. Hold on 1 second.
Very simple one. Where does your middle name come from?
My middle name. As part of my transition, I went to see one particular numerologist, and she said, your old name stops resonating with you. And there was some problem with my passport, and I had to rejig my name to Steve Nobel. And she said, numerologically, it means you're doing things the hard way. You need to change it. So I thought, I'll add a middle name. She said, great. I said, I'll add an angel name. She said, fine. So I went on the internet, I researched lots of angels, and I found one that said something like Messenger of God. I thought, wow, writer, Messenger of God, yes. So I changed it legally, and I had to tweak it to Anael. It wasn't exactly the name of the angel, but and I changed it legally. And then I just had this intuition to go online and check it out again. I couldn't find it for quite a while. And eventually I found an obscure website that said, Anael, angel of sex, passion, and love. I was like, oh my God. Wow. I wouldn't have chosen that. That's a bit strong, But that's part of my journey, I think, as well. But I just resisted that one, Angel of sex, passion, and love, it's like... So I'm a bit coy about that, So I'll tell you because you won't post it anywhere on Facebook. Yeah, thank you very much for listening. I hope you got something from it.
Ladies and gentlemen, Steve Nobel.